a very interesting topic that really points to what the future of finance will be with emerging technology and emerging business cases. We want to explore metaverse and the things that comes with it. Perhaps not quite a metaverse. Now, metaverse is part of a new branch of finance called decentralized finance that right on the new internet, Web 3.0, decentralized internet, so to speak. Now, for this discussion, we have a panel of experts and practitioners. Let me introduce them first. On our panel, first we have Kumardev Chatterjee. He is a Metaverse Mastermind, a technology thought leader, right? INTERPOL expert group, member of an INTERPOL expert group. He wears many hats. Now he's gonna start us with a definition of what all these terms mean. Okay, but before I invite him on stage, our other panelists, we also have Kun Top, Jirayut, Srupsrisopa, who's the founder and group CEO of Bitkub Capital Group, a holding company that comprises 9 different digital finance businesses. Bitkub is the largest digital asset exchange or platform in Thailand, right? It's got a dominant market share, 99% of market share it claims, founded by Kun Top, who also founded the largest Bitcoin wallet, coin.co.th, right, before he founded Bitkub. So Bitkub is also part of the World Economic Forum advisory group on development of digital assets and so on and so forth. So we'll be excited to kind of hear from him later. And also we have Ying, who is the head of product at Cake DeFi, a Singapore-based DeFi platform that offers various DeFi services. It started with retail customers, but now it's entering into the institutional space, helping institutions to enter into this DeFi area. So before we get everyone on stage, we'll get, as I mentioned, Kumardev to give us a introduction, definition of metaverse, decentralized finance, and what different institutions are doing in the space now. Come, Kumar. Oh, yeah. I don't have the clicker. Well, I put on a headset and we're not in the metaverse yet. I still need a clicker. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Fu. Very nice to meet you guys. We were there in the session this morning, and of course, Ying. So very quickly to set the context before we have I'm sure, a very engaging discussion. So the first question was, what is the metaverse? Now, I'm not going to go into what somebody wrote in some novel back in the day and everybody read, which is Neil Stephenson and all that. I'm going to tell you what it means practically and why the metaverse is not just another gaming platform and why Second Life, which you must have heard about, is not a metaverse. A metaverse needs to have these 6 elements: a digital twin of something. It could be a digital twin of a fantasy country or a fantasy land, but there has to be a digital twin. Yeah, because without that, you're just playing in a 3D environment. It's not a metaverse. So Grand Theft Auto actually, which has a kind of digital twin of LA, could be called a proto-metaverse, or Fortnite, where you can build, or Minecraft as well, where you can build, could be called proto-metaverses in some sense, but you need to have a virtual version of some physical infrastructure city. Number 2, it's a social platform. The metaverse is not for you to be in your own cubicle, in your own space alone, and this is not what a metaverse is. It's meant to be a social platform with multiple people on the platform interacting together in different ways, and it's replicating what you would do in the real world. of course, a digital marketplace. Now, you can build a metaverse without a crypto or digital assets. You can do it with fiat. I don't know what, I mean, that's how Second Life works, for example, to some degree. And the other ones, you have a token, but then ultimately it's fiat. But a real metaverse will have a digital marketplace, a true digital marketplace where you can trade assets and do finance and all these kinds of things. You can't see the ones below, so I'll read them. Integrated mixed reality. So Vision Pro obviously is the best example of that. But in general, the idea is that not that you are purely in a virtual space without connection with your physical reality, is that what you're seeing virtually is also available physically and vice versa. To the extent that, let's say I'm on a stage, but I could have in the future a virtual clicker that I can work with. And this virtual clicker is only available to me when I'm standing on stage. So there's a geolocation between the virtual clicker, which is lines of code, and the stage, which is built by bricks. Yeah, that's an example of what integrated physical mixed reality means. And then you've got to have what we call a gaming experience. And one of the biggest drawbacks of plain digital twins, and the reason why they haven't taken off is because it gets boring. If you go to Decentraland and you spend 2 hours going around the corner, you'll do that once, but not twice. That's why sometimes the numbers are down. So you need to have some reason to come back to this platform every day. Why do you go, the boomers, why do the boomers and the Gen X or whatever, why do we go to Facebook? Because we have our friends over there, you can interact and read news and say nasty things to each other. Yeah. So in the metaverse, you need to have something to do. And one of the things that you will be doing, and what kids are doing today, 14 and below, those of you who have kids in your early teens will know that, they're on the metaverse and they're trading. They're not going out there, dropping newspapers or cleaning tables. They are doing NFT sales and creating wearables for avatars and making thousands of dollars. They also spend thousands of dollars buying those things. Yeah. So there's an economy, there's a flourishing virtual economy there, and you must have that in your metaverse. It's not enough to have a digital twin, no matter how beautiful it looks. And lastly, I believe in this strongly, real-time translation. You cannot expect the metaverse to be purely English only, and I see no reason to do that. With Gen AI today, when you can create any kind of animation or characters with any language, and the translation is there, that will be a fundamental part of the metaverse. Now, I don't have time to go through everything because obviously we need to have the session, but these are some of the main areas of the metaverse: traction, digital payments, entertainment, retail, real estate, and of course you have a number of companies there. Here are some of the use cases. So not just gaming, these metaverse are not just about gaming. There are multi-billion-dollar use cases in multiple areas, from education to manufacturing, virtual cities, and digital events, and there's more. But here is the intersection of the metaverse and decentralized finance, I was going to say traditional finance. Today in finance, decentralized exchanges of all kinds, 13 billion. Market makers are obviously the highest in the most money, 35 billion. And then perpetual, that's contracts without an end date, but the smart version of that, 300 billion, already done. That is the intersection of decentralized finance and the upcoming platforms of the metaverse. All of these things exist today. So it's not like the metaverse will have to start from scratch. It will already inherit a flourishing decentralized economy. And the decentralization of the virtual will come together.
Thank you, Kumardev. Let us invite our other two panelists on stage and to start our panel discussion. And thanks, Kumardev, for that setting the context for our discussion. Okay, so this last slide, digital or DeFi, in the DeFi space, metaverse, the digital twins are being used, although today predominantly is in the gaming and the event space that it is mostly used. Khun Top, how is Bitkub, right, looking at the metaverse? You are a digital asset trading platform. You are engaged in digital finance. How do you see this emerging area where there are obviously consumers, the young consumers who are there, and a lot of your trading customers are also fairly in that segment of customers. How do you see it?
Sure. First of all, thank you, The Future of Finance, for inviting me on this stage, and a pleasure to be sharing the stage with both of you today. To answer your questions on the future of Metaverse, I think it comes down to two factors, right, for me. The first factor is we are heading towards a new set of infrastructures, Web3 infrastructures.
Yep.
Right? Bitkub, my company, was born during the Web2 infrastructures, the cloud computing era, the two-dimensional internet era, the laptops and the smartphones, right, the 4G fiber optic internet era. Whereas my parents' generation, they were born during the Web1, the one-way communication era, the physical, computer that is the size of a refrigerator, the modem that is connected to the home, telephone, internet, praising that, hopefully you can get connected to the internet, a private server era, right? But now we're entering a Web3 set of infrastructures, right? Internet from the sky is replacing 4G fiber optic internet, right? Vision Pro, right? Mixed reality, VR, MR, AR technology is replacing the two-dimensional internet, smartphones, the laptop computers. We're heading towards a three-dimensional, internet, right? A new computerized platform, right? And we have AI, artificial intelligence. We have blockchain to create digital scarcity for the world. So we can tokenize everything. We can democratize value. AI can democratize ability. Right? Internet can democratize communication. Right? We have big data. We have 3D printing. These are all the new set of infrastructures.
New technology that will build the new infrastructure.
That allows new capabilities for humans to interact, right? In a more scalable and meaningful manner. Now it is possible. Before it was just in the scientific cartoon, but now it is now becoming a reality because of these new set of infrastructures that are happening now today. And the second factor is the net zero. I'm very fortunate to be in a set of very few blockchain companies attending Davos as a member. We have a small group like Coinbase, Ripple, Circle, Bitkub, as a small regulated members forum. And they have been talking about net zero and carbon neutrality. This is a heavy discussed topic every year. And Bill Gates, he said we have to remember two numbers in his latest book, right? How to avoid a climate disaster: 52 and 0. Yep. 52 billion tons, 0. We are emitting 52 billion tons per year of greenhouse gas emissions. And during COVID, where we forego all the economic activities, airports were empty, streets were empty, no restaurants, nothing, no hotels, we still forego 50 billion tons per year. We only saved 2 billion, even though we forego all the economic activities. And people started to blame the energy sector for destroying the world. But fossil fuel only accounts for 26% of the 52 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions, right? We talk about solar, we talk about wind. What about the cement, the buildings? Accounts for 30%. What about the food we eat, the clothes we wear, right? What about money?
Right.
We are still killing trees.
How is Web3 solving those, cement, food, and
Bill Gates, he is feeling bad for flying private jets, and he's spending $7 million extra per year to buy green aviation fuel, right? But not everyone can afford this green aviation fuel because it is more expensive than traditional fuel.
Right.
You need economy of scale or volume to bring the cost down, right? So there are two possible scenarios going forward in the future. I attended the Future of Tourism session at Davos. I said, did you know that 30% of all the flights are corporate flights, fly for business, for meetings, right, for physical meetings, not for holiday? And imagine, to bring the cost down, you need volume. And in the next 10 years, the movement won't be driven by greenwashing, cosmetic, look good, CSR. It will be driven by reward and punishment mechanism, carrot and stick, meaning that soon, all those 30% flying for businesses, connections, meetings, they may be the first to take the hit to bring the cost down. All the corporate flights, they have to be forced to buy green aviation fuel to bring the cost down so that everyone can get on board, with a more economical fuel. Or get on Metaverse, but not destroying the world. Sometimes this meeting, we don't have to be physically be here. We can all be wearing Vision Pro right now and not destroying the world.
Right.
So if you want to destroy the world, you buy green aviation fuel, or you just get on a metaverse for business meetings, right? So I think it comes down to two factors, right? The readiness of the set of new infrastructures, Web3 infrastructures, right? And also because of the net zero movement, because we don't have planet B, we only have planet A, and it's beyond point of return already on some of the issues.
Okay. So very interesting at this session on the first day closing of our physical meeting after 3 years of a lot of virtual meeting, that the future is actually going to be virtual. So something to kind of chew on. Ying Chong, right? So Cake Group, how are you looking at the metaverse, and how are you moving this in the decentralized finance space? You were catering mainly to retail users, now entering into the institutional space, working with financial institutions and banks. And what are the challenges that you face?
Yep. Thanks. Firstly, thanks for having me here in this panel with this two wonderful gentlemen. So I think just also to firstly echo what Kumar shared previously during his opening for this session, was that metaverse as a concept is made up of many things, right? NFTs, decentralized finance kind of intersects everything. So I think it might be a bit dismissive to just lump everything as metaverse firstly. Coming back to Cake Group, so like what you just said, we started out as a really simply put, right, simplifying access into DeFi, decentralized finance, for retail investors. So that means really making it very simple, easy to understand, because one inherent challenge for blockchain even until today is the complexity, right? So how do you abstract away that complexity while allowing more participation to happen? So that was kind of the initial, the starting point of the company. And then now it's more of thinking about how we can stretch that for even, institutions. So in this case, when it comes to institutions, obviously it's not just about companies wanting to access DeFi specifically. There can be more than that use case. So in this case, some companies maybe just want to be part of the evolution, right? It will be, I think, a bit idealistic to say that everyone is going to go all into Web3 from day one. So a lot of them take a wait and see approach. What does it mean, right? That means maybe exposing a bit of your treasury into digital assets. And that's where custody becomes a very core focus. And that's where our institutional arm called Levane is part of that, sort of supporting that movement, providing that infrastructure to really understand, helping these companies understand how you can easily participate while being sure that your assets are secure. Because there's always this question, right, with all these different let's call it incidents that happened in the past with the crashes and all that, FTX, for example. All this brings a bit more fear to the environment, because people will be like, so are my assets safe? So the key thing, if you ask, the challenge here is to really allow them, firstly, to have the assurance that their assets are safe, both for the retail investors and also for businesses. And number two, to feel confident that they have control of their assets. And I think ultimately what underlies all this is transparency. I think that goes back all the way to the point of decentralized finance, or even just blockchain as a whole, is providing that verifiability, that transparency to every participant, right? So what this means is the challenge here, again, I talked about complexity or simplicity of experience, but I also talked about transparency. And I think the most interesting conundrum here is, if you want to be transparent, then you inherently make it a bit more complex, because if I want to show you how the engine is made in the car, I need to show you the hood, right? And then I have to expose everything to you. What does it mean? Will you be scared and therefore not participate? So I think it's always a fine line to draw. But just to close this off, I think Cake Group always prides ourselves in transparency and making sure that you, if you choose to, are able to prove that you have the ability, or you have your funds is where we say it is, right? So you can prove it on the blockchain. Same for the customers over the vein, right? We don't have access to your assets. We are just purely an infrastructure provider. If you want us to prove that, your assets are non-movable by us, right? That's purely fine. Like that's exactly fine because that's kind of the core product mission of the group in general. Thanks.
Okay, great. Going back to Kumardev, thank you for kind of giving us this overview, this context of where Metaverse is. How do you see the Metaverse? There are use cases. It's currently predominantly in, although you say there are applications in different spaces, but mainly is in e-sport, e-gaming, is in entertainment, is an event. Quite limited use cases in terms of relevance to finance, quite limited as well. There are obviously financial institutions that have been early adopter, announcing that they're going to develop, as you mentioned, digital twins, right? And the best digital twins are their branch in the Metaverse. It will take a while for finance to get into the Metaverse. That's for the future. Decentralized finance is more real. It's happening already. How do you see Metaverse? Is it really critical to the decentralized finance proposition at this point?
No, I think that's an excellent question. I think that's an excellent question to start with. And then if you want to have the answer, I think there's essentially 3 areas, right? A lot of the things that are happening today at a peer-to-peer financing, whether that's using a DeFi platform or a DeFi protocol or a mechanism, or simply barter, and that's peer-to-peer financing, or going through the banking system in some way, although that's not really peer-to-peer, that's peer-to-peer with a controller. Either way, at the end of it, you have at least one user, and in most cases, 2 users, right? The point of the Metaverse, and with all the limitations that we have today, access technology, so you're not really able to, not everybody can go and put on a headset or access a 3D immersive environment. And also similarly, not everybody is inclined to do that or inclined to work with avatars. Some people call them cartoons, right? So it'll take a while for this to pick up. While the younger generation, for them, it's very natural to do all of these things because they're born with this digital first version first. Either way, you need to have a way of transacting. And that way of transacting, the question that I think is fundamental here is, why do we need banknotes?
Why do we need bank?
And if you go back in the history of banknotes was simply a piece of paper saying, I owe you, connected to a piece of gold that the bank had, right? The gold has gone. The notes have now become a value by themselves. But in the end of the day, if tomorrow I stop believing in one banknote, I don't believe in the value of what's written on it, right? So you need to have a mechanism of transfer, and this is what a token is, right? So what the advantage of the Metaverse here is that whether that token is issued by a bank, a financial institution, or issued and traded on a decentralized finance platform, either way, the token allows anybody to participate directly with anybody else, and to do that without incurring all kinds of fees and protocols that today we have to do. As we say in the US now, once the moment you give some money to the bank, it becomes the bank's money. It's no longer your money. You cannot withdraw it when you want to. You might be stopped. You might even be stopped if you want to make a payment, right? So that is where the power of decentralized finance and the power of using what we call crypto finance in the end of the day, moving away from the banking system, is useful. The Metaverse will turbocharge that. I was saying in my last session when I gave my keynote, is that imagine you yourself can become a bank ultimately, because you can have tokens that represent different things. You can have a token that represents a fractional value of your actual asset reserves, how many houses you have or apartments you have. You can have a token that represents the speculative value of how much you will earn in your career being a lawyer, for example, right? So you can pretty much tokenize multiple things. You can provide that.
And you become the asset.
You become the asset provider, and then you can use decentralized platforms and tokenization, essentially tokenomics, to be able to run yourself as a bank there. So I think on the decentralized finance side and on the crypto side, it's pretty clear that the metaverse is the next stage. And this infrastructure being designed the way it has been designed, i.e., basically working by consensus.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, there's some consensus protocol somewhere, is very well built for that environment for a peer-to-peer transaction. Where does that leave the banks? Where it leaves the banks is that you will have to adapt. Today, yes, your customer base might be 50, majorly 50 and up. I mean, talking about the ones with the heavy deposits. But in 10 years from now, a lot of the heavy deposits would have gone because we have pension systems are crashing. So those people will withdraw those money or sell their assets to fund their life because the lifespan is increasing and pensions are crashing. So in the end, you have to sell assets, right? But the younger generation, we are generating assets in a certain sense out of thin air, right? Look at Dogecoin. What asset is that based on?
Okay.
But there is a value to that.
Where is it now? Dodge.
Right?
Yeah.
So, or Shibu, or many of the other
Yeah.
ones, altcoins, and you can call them some other name anyway. But the point is that you can create assets on value pretty much out of thin air.
Right.
And the younger generation, this for them is a very standard concept that I assign a value to something that you have that you may not necessarily want to monetize, and then I actually convert that
Mhm.
into actual asset and monetization. So the banks have, if they want to survive, they will have to get onto this.
Okay.
And it's not going to happen overnight.
Which is what Emmanuel Daniel in his book talked about,
Correct.
personalization of finances here. It's not how the banks package finance for the customer, is
Correct.
the customer taking control of it.
Yes. And so I think that on the metaverse, the banks must, it's a fallacy to say, oh, either we are all on the metaverse or we are not. No, you need to have a roadmap. Start by having a presence, start by onboarding, start by KYC, ultimately do some AML, which is pretty hard, by the way, at the moment, given the regulations. But ultimately, you have to be there on the metaverse, but at the time when the volume is built, when there are thousands of transactions happening per minute in some, and some of them already have that, Roblox has that, for example, you're going to need, if you want to compete with
Yeah.
the new players, you're going to need to do that. So the question to me is not so much
Yeah.
about, is there a use case? Is there scalability now? The question is, do you want to stay relevant to your customers and to your market in the next 10 years? If you want to do that, the metaverse should be at the center of your strategy.
Yep.
And the smart ones, and the people sitting here, they get it. So they have already built the infrastructure. And so they're very well poised to take advantage of that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kumar. I know the bankers, on the floor, but we'll be thinking, right? Do I have to be a first mover, or can I be just a fast follower, right? So, and the whole concept of financial freedom, right?
Yeah.
So, money in the bank is not, you don't have full control of it, right? So, which is something that Kun talks about. Now you have 9 other companies, the biggest of which is the digital asset exchange. Are one of the other 9 companies looking at metaverse, and how are you bring metaverse as a reality to your customers today?
Sure. I would like to add on Mr. Kumardev concept. For the banks, we have to separate into 3 layers,
Mhm.
right? The protocol layer, or the transactional protocol layer, the back end engine, and the front end customer facing part, right? The protocol layer, all the banking industry have been innovating or building businesses on the assumption that the protocol layer is physical, right? We're killing trees to make paper money.
Yep.
Some countries even was using plastic
Oh, yes.
for money, right? And how are we going to reach net zero, right? 52 to 0, right? By reducing consumption alone is not enough. Clearly during COVID, it shows. So with the new generation, of financial platforms, we are building our digital infrastructure based on the fundamental belief that even the protocol layer is changing to becoming digital,
Right.
not physical.
Okay.
For the backend infrastructure, right? The banks are doing this really well. All the backend utility function like AML, KYC, reporting, and they are trying to upgrade the engine for efficiency, mostly, right? But what the banks are not doing so well is the front end customer facing part.
Mhm.
The 1.0 version are bank branches, right? Armor trucks to move money around, ATMs. These are the front end customer experience, front end customer facing part.
Now they have mobile banks.
Now the second generation, right? They're removing bank branches, armor
Mhm.
trucks, ATMs to start this mobile banking applications or virtual banking, right? But the experience is not sticky. You have to understand the first layer has to be, the protocol layer has to be cost effective so that you can bring financial inclusion to the rest of the world, right? Not bank branches, armor trucks. These are some cost. So 2 billion people are currently excluded from traditional economy because they're not meeting minimum threshold to be bankable, right? The second, the backend infrastructure, the core, the key is efficiency, right? To upgrade the engine for efficiency,
Right.
all the mundane, legacy system. But on the front end, the key is stickiness. The bank's mobile apps or I don't know, it's not sticky. When you go on Facebook, when you go on TikTok, it is very sticky, right?
Right.
It's a race for the attention to the bottom of the brainstem by using curated AI or ranking AI,
Okay.
right? They are able to grab attention for, from the customers. But when you access a banking website or digital banking app,
Or
you want to
super app.
quit as soon as possible, as soon as your transaction is done.
Okay.
So the key is metaverse. It's not about replacing the protocol or the backend utility providers part, but it's all about front end customer facing parts.
Okay.
And we are betting not just protocol layer becoming digital, we are also betting that the gaming industry, which currently is already bigger than the music plus the movie industries combined, right? You talked about esports.
Mhm.
I'm a football fan. I love Premier League football.
Right.
And we have this NBA, basketball, baseball. Esport would be the biggest sports on earth.
So this infrastructure comprising the protocol layer, right? The middle, right, and the front end. Is it here already? In, for example, Bitkub, are you organized like that or are you designed like that?
Yes, sure. So the protocol layer, right? We are building on an open source, protocol. Like Bitcoin is an open source, right? Ethereum is an open source transactional protocol. Small people can innovate without the need to ask for permission. Versus CBDCs,
Yeah.
or local on digital banking apps. These are closed system. So we are building on a. Let me break down the three parts. Right, we are building on an open source protocol. Right, on the engine, we are building a financial platform. Right, not a single channel, but a multiple channel. I think the best analogy is to compare to the communication industry. Before, we used to have a TV as one communication channel, radio as one communication channel, traditional telegram post office is different separate channel. There enters Facebook. Facebook is all channels, or the internet, right? Internet, on Facebook we have digital TV, we have digital podcast, radio. We can communicate, we can advertise. It's all communication platform.
Right.
Future, look at the financial space right now. When you want to remit money, you go to one channel. When you want to save money, you go to one channel. When you want to send money across without having a bank account, you go to Western Union.
Okay.
They have single channels, but the technology is already ready to do an all channel services. So we are building a financial platform of the future.
Okay.
Right. And on the upper part, we are bringing gamification.
Gamification.
Right. To create stickiness for the end user experience. And we believe that in the future, in-game assets would be the biggest assets on earth. Imagine this experience where you're collecting swords, right? And you can stake your swords, just like you stake your money, and the decks behind all the open source protocol. People can innovate, just like how we build buildings in the physical world to open up many new businesses. There are many decentralized protocols that you can launch and people to invest in your protocols and earn money from activities from online users, right? You can stake your swords. And imagine if you are hungry and you physically walk over to Burger King, you wire your sauce for the burger. During the transaction, there is a thing called DEX, decentralized exchange protocol, where you can pull all the liquidity from every run around the world, auto convert to whatever the format that Burger King wants.
Okay.
Burger King can set up the system that I will only accept Thai baht, Thai digital baht, CBDCs or Bitcoin or physical fiat, without the need to know whatever format that you pay for your burger with. The receiving end and the sender end can use different formats, and there'll be a full interoperability.
Interoperability, right? So between digital assets, which is the SWOT that you're referring to, a token.
In this case, it can be carbon credit.
Okay.
It can be electricity units. Right? There's a market price for everything once it's tokenized. It could be a square meter of real estate.
Okay, we got limited time, but I want to get to what is, I think, very important right now. So and to both Ying Chong and to Kun Top, because you're in the space already, and from a lot of the discussion that we've been having today, now you have the kind of privilege to operate in Thailand, where regulation on digital asset is very clear. You have a very clear mandate to do what you do as a digital asset exchange. In other jurisdictions, it's not so clear. It's maybe a digital payment token license or a primary payment institution, so to speak, right? Well, but it's not to deal in digital asset, but to use digital asset as a utility. How critical is that part of it, being a regulated player, and to exist, to create trust as a regulated player? And will it continue? Is the tide changing in the US, with recent Fed action on Binance and Coinbase? They were allowing trading to happen on their platform, but now they say no, these are illegal. In Singapore, your license as more of a payment player, right? So yeah, if you could share with us, where do you see regulation? There are obviously some jurisdictions that are kind of more open to digital asset, and there are those that are less. Dubai is very open. Switzerland is very open. They're very clear in terms of how to regulate the different form of digital assets.
Yeah, I think this conversation changes almost on a week-on-week basis. So it's not something that is very easy.
A lot of flip-flopping.
Correct. I think it's also, I actually feel that this is kind of the nature of every new industry, right? Like if you're trying to change something that's so fundamental to society for the longest time, these things, everyone needs to change, and regulation basically regulates everyone's behavior. Yes. With new emergence coming up, then therefore the question, how do we manage these behaviors? And I think maybe before I touch on the regulation part, I think it's more of thinking about the behavior itself. Why it's moving so quickly is also because using Kumar's example about kids flipping NFTs, earning money and all that. Sure, a lot of us in this room probably would think that, yeah, it's just a JPEG. Why are we so fascinated by it? But the idea is not so much a JPEG itself. It's the fact that because of this contribution or this activity within the space, then more and more development, especially within the open source community, starts to happen, and therefore paving way for an eventual state where the common masses are able to adopt that technology or that experience. So without this, this early adopters,
Yep.
right, trying to figure out how that whole experience can become a bit better day by day, it's not possible for an eventual adoption for the masses, right? So because of this like meandering and left and right of like changes in development, even within in the recent times, Bitcoin as an example came up with Bitcoin ordinals, right, which is NFTs on Bitcoin. And even that space is changing every day. It's hard to keep up. If you don't follow the news for like 24 hours, it changes. And that's how fast innovation change in that space, because there's excitement. And going back to Kun Top's idea about stickiness, right? That's where in the early adopter space, there's a lot of stickiness, which I think from the ground up is changing the behavior and the use cases of DeFi and of like, I would say Web3 in general. So therefore, regulation also continuously is learning as we go. And it always comes back to the question on what is the, how much do we want to draw the line, right? Because regulation is still unclear. So it's always more of like we know they're gonna probably highlight a few things that will be very, very clear, right, in black and white. And then the rest of them, especially for the area, the environment in Singapore, is that it's more of a wait and see, but looking very closely in the industry, working with close industry partners. For example, we work very closely with the regulators to share with them what is going on, right, in the space, so that they know, okay, this is an upcoming space, and then here's probably where we need to draw some lines. I think eventually it's going to be helpful.
Have they drawn the line in Singapore already?
Some
You know,
areas,
MAS?
yes. For example,
No,
I think
not for digital, not for retail investment.
not exactly directly, but I think in that space, it's more about the transfer of it. I think this is more towards the AML side of things, because naturally, if you want to do fund transfer, if you're using a Swift network, you know where the destination bank account is, you know, who owns it and all that. So you have all that all that information on the bank record. But on the blockchain, especially if you're using a non-custodial wallet, which means it's purely just hashes, right? You would not be able to identify who you're sending the money to, and therefore that poses a challenge. But I think with this sort of like clear identification over time, it also creates a better perimeter for all players to work within. That's, I think, it will happen for sure. We can't just say we hope that regulation never comes. I think it's more of like working hand in hand rather than going against it, and then identifying that boundaries at some point so that we can clearly be creative within that boundary. I think that's what's important for growth within this sector.
Okay. Top on this part about regulation. Would there be convergence of global regulation towards digital assets, because it's a global business use case, right? It cannot be just in a few jurisdictions in order for it to thrive and flourish.
Sure. I've been in this space for 9 years now, doing digital asset exchanges, and there are two philosophies of running the exchange. The first philosophy are those guys moving fast, breaking things, apologizing later. You know those guys.
Yeah, the FTX, the there.
Yeah, and the second philosophy is to work closely with the regulators from day one, being regulated from day one, moving a bit slower, be for efficiency or productivity for good corporate governance, right? And it's the first guys that are messing the whole space up, and we're being punished. The second group are being punished for the first guys that are cutting corners, right? And you see, we are seeing clear trends of convergence towards a latter philosophy. Bitkub used to have, at the peak here, we used to have $2 billion of customers' deposits.
2 billion, right?
2 billion. Up to today, if we normalize the price, because the price dropped a lot, but if you normalize the price back to the peak here, we now have 3 billion. So we actually have a surge in customers' deposits, fleeing away from those unregulated exchanges because they trust us more. And
okay, more than the regulated physical exchange.
We are the physical regulated exchanges, right? And we have to partly thank the regulators from Thailand for being clear from day one. They gave us a proper digital asset exchange license, whereas the likes of Coinbase, they have only the payments license, remittance license. They don't have a proper direct digital asset exchange license. So Thailand is clear from day one. Even the definitions of tokens, right? We have cryptocurrency, we have investment tokens, we have utility tokens. In the US, they're still debating between altcoins becoming securities versus Bitcoin, right? So Thailand, we have to partly thank the regulators for being clear from day one and being able to launch proper businesses here. And also for putting good corporate governance, right? We were crying at the start because we have to keep, obviously we keep our customers' money one-to-one, dollar to dollar. We can't really, we have to segregate the funds, but we have to have an additional money on top, NCR, right? And we can't even use this money for payroll for anything. It's just money sitting on top of the
like reserve, right? Capital.
Yeah. So that's the cost of doing business. The inefficiency we see, but it's those stuff that brings trust back after those first group messing up the space. We need to bring trust back by providing transparency, by running the business based on good CG, right? At one point, I think at the end of this year, there'll be a new regulation forcing us to have 1 in 3 of the board directors must be independent. And that you have to separate the role between the chairman and the CEO, and the head of the board could be the lead independent director. We have subcommittees, coalisting committee. We have a proper CG, right?
Okay.
That's how you bring the trust back. And I would like to quote Warren Buffett. He said, "When the tide goes away, that's when you see those who are swimming naked."
Yeah.
So the market will self-select in the long run. There'll be a natural selection, just like DNA mutation.
Okay.
You know, the strongest will survive in the long run. So we are moving towards a regulated exchanges, and we have to thank the regulators for being clear on the definition from day one. And I think all the regulators around the world need to talk,
yeah,
and standardize on the governance structure, right? On the definition. We need to have more like
Forum like this
for
yes.
the regulators, right? To have a standard.
Okay. And so now we run out of time, and but thanks for all the sharing, Kumardev, Kuntop, and Ying Zhong. It's very hard to put a conclusion to this, to this discussion because it's ongoing. We talk about the potential of the new infrastructure for finance in the future that is decentralized, that is that create trust, that is efficient, and so on and so forth. But this is an area perhaps where we talk about regulatory uncertainty. In this market is clear. So in Thailand, you're very lucky. The regulators are very clear in terms of where digital assets are. In some other markets, it's less. And as in a lot of business that are regulated, you go with where the regulators go. And in this space, it's still developing. But it is a space that is important because it has the potential to transform finance to be more efficient. Definitely, you have players like Bitkub, Cake that are making headways in this area. The least you can do is to find out what they are doing, right? Have conversation with this, and tab over. We will continue to cover this area as it unfolds. So thank you to all our panelists. We have to clear the stage because we're going to use this for something else. But to all our audience, do have conversation with all 3 of them, okay, and see what part of their business can you apply, or at least start a conversation if you have not already. Okay, so on that note, thank you very much. Okay, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're gonna take a photo.
With this, we have come to the end of day 1 of the Asian Banker Finance Summit 2023. Really hope that you have enjoyed today's insightful sessions. We have some very exciting speakers and sessions happening tomorrow on digital payments, cybersecurity, blockchain and DeFi, digital assets, and AI. Please note that the conference tomorrow will start 9 a.m. sharp. We thank you and we look forward to welcome you again tomorrow.
Yes. Wait.